T-minus 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 3, 2, 1, 0, and liftoff of Space Shuttle Atlantis on a mission to build, resupply, and to do research on the International Space Station.
Houston now controlling. Atlantis begins its penultimate journey to shore up the International Space Station. Atlantis now in the proper alignment for its 8.5-minute ride to orbit. 4.5 million pounds of hardware and humans taking aim on the International Outpost. 30 seconds into the flight. Atlantis almost 2 miles in altitude, almost 6 miles downrange from the Kennedy Space Center already, traveling 500 miles an hour. The 3 liquid fuel main engines now throttling back to 72% rated performance going into the bucket, reducing
The invisible enemy. What does POTUS mean when he says that the world is at war with a hidden enemy? What does he mean when he says we will defeat an invisible enemy?
Challenging time for all Americans. We're enduring a great national trial, and we will prove that we can meet the moment. I want to assure the American people that we're doing everything we can each day to confront and ultimately defeat this horrible, invisible enemy. We're at war. In a true sense, we're at war, and we're fighting an invisible enemy. Think of that. So it cost me billions of dollars to be president, and I am so happy I did it. Because who cares? Who cares? I'm really happy with the job we're doing, and I'm glad that this team and me are here for this horrible thing. I mean, it's a number of people have said it, and I feel it, actually. I'm a wartime president. This is a war. This is a war, different kind of a war than we've ever had.
What did he mean when he said we're going to Mars very soon?
Today, we'll refocus America's space program on human exploration and discovery. It marks an important step in returning American astronauts to the moon for the first time since 1972 for long-term exploration and use. This time, we will not only plant our flag and leave our footprint, we will establish a foundation for an eventual mission to Mars and perhaps someday to many worlds beyond.
Here's my theory. I don't think he's referring to the coronavirus. I think, get ready for this, he's telling us that we're going to war with the Roman Empire, which has been hiding in Greenland. You're probably thinking, how in the actual fuck did you come up with this crazy ass theory? I know it sounds crazy, and I swear I'm not crazy. I promise. Let's follow the White Rabbit.
I imagine that right now you're feeling a bit like Alice. Tumbling down the rabbit hole?
You could say that.
I can see it in your eyes. You have the look of a man who accepts what he sees because he is expecting to wake up. Ironically, this is not far from the truth. Do you believe in fate, Neil?
No,
Why not?
because I don't like the idea that I'm not in control of my life.
I know exactly what you mean. Let me tell you why you're here. You're here because you know something. What you know you can't explain, but you feel it. You felt it your entire life, that there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there, like a splinter in your mind, driving you mad. It is this feeling that has brought you to me. Do you know what I'm talking about?
The Matrix.
Do you want to know what it is? The Matrix is everywhere. It is all around us. Even now, in this very room. You can see it when you look out your window or when you turn on your television. You can feel it when you go to work, when you go to church, when you pay your taxes. It is the world that has been pulled over your eyes to blind you from the truth.
What truth?
That you are a slave, Neo. Like everyone else, you were born into bondage, born into a prison that you cannot smell or taste or touch. A prison for your mind. Unfortunately, no one can be told what the Matrix is. You have to see it for yourself. This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
It all started when POTUS announced the Space Force and that we were going to the moon and Mars. It just didn't sit well with me because I don't believe we ever went to the moon. So how are we going to the moon and Mars now? Mars had to mean something else. But what? Warning. If you still think we landed on the moon in 1969 and Nixon called the moon from his desk, you need to wake up. Check this out.
Why has nobody been to the moon in such a long time?
That's not an 8-year-old's question. That's my question. I want to know, but I think I know. Because we didn't go there, and because we didn't go there, and because we didn't go there, and that's the way it happened. And if it didn't happen, it's nice to know why it didn't happen, so in the future, if we want to keep doing something, we need to know why something stopped in the past that we wanted to keep it going. Money is a good thing. If you want to buy new things, new rockets, instead of keep doing the same thing over, then it's going to cost more money. And other things need more money too. So having achieved what the president wanted us to do, and then what thousands, millions of people in America and millions of people around the world. You know, when we toured around the world after we came back, the most fascinating observation was signs that said, we did it. Not just us, not just America, but we, the world, different countries. They felt like they were part of what we were able to do. And that made us feel very good.
Read between the lines. Take a listen.
I'd go to the moon in a nanosecond. The problem is we don't have the technology to do that anymore. We used to, but we destroyed that technology, and it's a painful process to build it back again. But going to Mars should be one of the next series of steps that humans do. The first step should be going back to the moon for a number of technical reasons and exploration reasons, and then after that, Mars, maybe high orbit in Venus atmosphere, maybe going to Europa. There's all kinds of targets to go to, places of interest in our solar system. The only limit to human future is in our own imaginations.
So what else could Mars mean? Well, all the planets in our solar system are named after Roman gods. And Mars is the Roman god of war and was regarded as an ancestor of the Roman people. And Mars equals March. Then Trump decides he wants to buy Greenland. This didn't sit well with me either. I know there were a few theories floating around, but there had to be a deeper meaning. He wanted us to focus on Greenland for some reason. But why? Full disclosure, as many of you know, I'm a massive Donald Trump fan. I have followed Q from the beginning and I fully trust the plan. But since the Mars announcement, I learned that the Earth is flat and not like any of these. It looks like this. Just like the United Nations logo, the WHO logo, International Maritime logo, Gleason's map, and the World War II Global Air Strategy map. Why would global organizations use these logos if Earth doesn't look like that? Note, the logos are divided into 33 sections. Now, before you say, Q said the Earth isn't flat, and consider the vastness of space. Well, Q also says that disinfo is necessary, and that God is with us. So what is it? Is God real? Or no? Did God create it? Or no? Do you believe a single Q post or 135? I'll take 135. Q can't afford to distract from the Great Awakening message. If Q confirmed Flat Earth, imagine how quickly the media and trolls would jump on that. Waking the masses up to the corruption is priority number one for Q right now. It's time to expand our thinking, folks. Phi is about God and creation. Earth is a circle with a dome, just like the Bible says. So if you believe in God and believe in Q and Q+, yet you mock flat earthers, please reread the Bible soon, because you're either not understanding what the Bible says, or you don't really believe. Need proof of the dome? In 1955, Antarctic expeditions discovered the dome. Until 1958, encyclopedias wrote about the dome. Check this out.
The flights proved inland areas to be featureless in character with a dome 13,000 feet high at about latitude 80 degrees south, longitude 90 degrees east. Take a really close look at that. Now I'm going to zoom it in for you. When they returned to New Zealand, these flights proved the inland areas to be featureless in character with a dome 13,000 feet high at about latitude 80 degrees south, longitude 90 degrees east. Now, if this doesn't make sense to you, let me show you with an image of what a flat Earth map would look like. Now, this is what latitude 80 degrees south would look like on a flat Earth map. As you can see, the dome comes down closer to you over the wall, which will be about 13,000 feet. Now, if you go back out into the center of the Earth, or up the North Pole, and try to go up to the firmament with a little bit of calculation, it's going to show that it's about 385,500 feet away. It's really, really simple, folks. Now, if you're not familiar with any of this at all, and you're just now new to all this, you could say, well, this guy is crazy. He doesn't know what he's talking about. But what you got to ask yourself is, why do all the maps before 1958 show a flat Earth with the ice wall around it and a firmament, a dome? And why does the encyclopedia tell you that there's a dome there, and it gives you the exact height at a certain latitude and longitude? Well, the reason is because in 1958, that's when all governments and all nations of the world signed the UN treaty to ban all civilians from going to the Antarctica, and NASA came in and erased everything, just like they're erasing everything today. So again, ask yourself, if all this existed before 1958, why doesn't it exist now? How come it all of a sudden was erased and just disappeared out of your history books, out of your encyclopedias, out of your libraries? Wake up, people. Wake up.
Then, in 1958, NASA was formed with Nazis from Operation Paperclip, and the dome was all but forgotten. Check this out.
In 1945, when the U.S. Army found von Braun and his group and the rockets in the underground factory, at the time, President Roosevelt and then Truman had okayed a project to bring German scientists to the U.S. outside our system, because keep in mind, these people most were members, at least members of the Nazi Party. And being a member of a fascist organization, you couldn't get into the United States at the time. So Paperclip brought them over here outside of the system, so to speak. They had no visas. The von Braun group went first to Fort Bliss, Texas, to build rockets for the U.S. Army. So they went from building rockets for Hitler to building rockets for us. There was supposed to be, the policy of Paperclip, there's a clause that they were supposed to exclude members of the SS, ardent Nazis, supposedly, and war criminals. The men in the Joint Chiefs of Staff that ran the project played a little fudging with the records and, in essence, changed the background checks so that doctored, whitewashed dossiers went to the State Department. So, in other words, von Braun and the rest of them got their U.S. citizenship based on doctored records.
Want more proof of the dome? Look no further than the Antarctic Treaty, Operation Dominic, and Operation Fishbowl.
Hast thou with him spread out the sky, which is strong and as a molten looking glass?
For this they willingly are ignorant of, that by the word of God the heavens were of old, and the earth standing out of the water and in the water.
When I look at the people who signed the Antarctic Treaty, see, this is what happened, man. In the 1920s, Admiral Byrd went to the North Pole and supposedly found an opening to inner Earth, which is incredible if that's true. You would think he'd spend the rest of his career, checking that out. I mean, and everybody would go check it out. But they didn't. He went to the South Pole, and you would think, well, maybe presumably he's going to see if there's another opening down there. But he spent the entire rest of his military career and life actually going down there. He died in 1957. Right before he died, there were a couple of very interesting, this is what my latest work is a timeline that I'm putting together. And I actually start with the Tower of Babel, and I'm going all the way up to this September with CERN. That's the timeline that I'm covering, but really focusing in on the 1940s, 50s, and 60s, and up to 72 during the Apollo program. You've got people never really got to Antarctica until the 1800s because they just weren't able to do it. Late 1800s finally start finding ways to break through the ice, and this is interesting. James Cook, I think was his name. I believe it was in the 1700s, maybe 1700s or 1800s. He got to the coast of Antarctica. Let me see if I could pull this up here. Yeah, okay. This is a work in progress. I'm not ready to actually publish this blog yet, but I have it kind of a work in progress. Okay, 1773, on 30 January 1774, James Cook reaches 71 degrees 10 minutes south, farthest south, coming within 75 miles of the Antarctic mainland without seeing it. Okay, later reports said that during 3 voyages lasting 3 years and 8 days, Captain Cook and crew sailed a total of 60,000 miles along the Antarctic coastline, never once finding an inlet or path through or beyond the massive glacial wall. So the other question is, well, how come ships don't go off the sea if it's flat? How come ships don't fall off the edge? Well, here's why you don't fall off the edge. There's a 200 to 300 foot high wall that is the coastline of Antarctica. It's the border that Scripture says is keeping everything in. Nothing's going past that. But yet the Earth is 25,000 miles in circumference, allegedly. It took him 60,000 miles to circumnavigate Antarctica. That's curious. Now, I think that's cumulative over 3 years, though, so I don't know quite what to make of that statement. But I don't know. So in the 1700s, this guy gets there. You get into the 1800s, they get closer and closer. And then when you get to the 1900s, that's where things get really interesting. Shackleton, this guy Shackleton, goes down there on the, and I think I put this in my original blog. He goes down there on the name of the ship is the Nimrod. He goes down there on the Nimrod, and it's called the Nimrod Expedition. I'm like, seriously? Okay, Nimrod's goal was to reach into heaven, right? Yeah, the Nimrod Expedition. So you can click on the link I got there and read all about the Nimrod Expedition, British Antarctic Expedition, otherwise known as the Nimrod Expedition. And it was on the name of the ship was the Nimrod right here. Okay, Nimrod was trying to reach into heaven by going up. Could it be that these guys are trying to go out, try to find the ground floor? I don't know, but I mean, why do you? And this is what really got me is they did so in 1908. 1908. I'm like, really? 1908? Seriously? 1908 is when Nimrod was born, according to my other. Let me see what I put in here. This is one of my other blogs. Yeah. Okay. The 350 post-flood years of Noah's life. This is a chart I did last year, and the follow-up chart, the Nimrod-Abraham timeline. Nimrod was born in 1908 AM, or years since creation. And then 1908, see, 1907 and 1909, well, that's 1908. Nimrod went to Antarctica. I'm like, I mean, you can't write this stuff. I mean, wow. Okay, so they go down there. A whole bunch of people are, from that point on, once they start finding ways to get through the ice to get there, more and more expeditions and better ships are built and used to get there. Then you get to Admiral Byrd. Now, when Admiral Byrd goes down there several times, and one of the operations is called Operation High Jump. And you're like,
oh, geez.
Yeah, right. Operation High Jump. Operation High Jump. Really? Operation High Jump. I mean, because they went out there with aircraft carriers and airplanes and stuff, some real heavy equipment and stuff like that. Operation High Jump. So then he gets on TV, national TV, and he does this radio show where he talks about all of the natural resources down there. I mean, coal and uranium and stuff that fuel the world forever. It's wonderful. And you can go on YouTube and look up the Admiral Byrd news interview. I think it was on CBS. And it's wonderful. And all these nations are going down there, Russia and Japan, all these nations are going down there. Check it out. Well, then he goes down after that interview. They go down on the next mission, which I believe was called Operation Deep Freeze. And then all of a sudden, everything changes. Everybody pulls out. They leave Antarctica. and all the nations that were down there doing whatever they were doing signed a treaty, the Antarctic Treaty, and I believe it was 1958 or somewhere thereabouts, saying, nope, nobody can stake a claim to Antarctica, and if you're going to go down there, you can only go down there for scientific reasons under carefully restricted guidance, but it's not a free-for-all. Nobody can just, hey, I'm going to go check out Antarctica and do a high jump on my own. Nope, can't do it. So when I look at the nations that signed the Antarctic Treaty, and I look at the nations that are putting forward quote-unquote space videos of the Earth, they're the same people. So if I was to put on my tinfoil hat and play the conspiratorial role here, there definitely appears to be some very suspicious things that took place. Then all of a sudden NASA is formed, and then simultaneously you have Russia and the United States doing high-altitude nuclear bomb testing. They're blowing up nuclear bombs high up in the atmosphere, and they called it Operation Fishbowl. I mean, you can't make this stuff up, man. I mean, they're calling it Operation Fishbowl. Okay, so I mean, Admiral Byrd goes down there, Operation High Jump, 1946 through 47, and Operation Deep Freeze, 1955 through 56. Then he dies on March 11th, 1957. Then the Antarctic Treaty takes place shortly after his death. We see that the main treaty was open for signature on December 1st, 1959, and officially entered into force on June 23rd, 1961. Meanwhile, okay, let's put the chronology here. You got, again, Operation High Jump 46 through 47, Operation Deep Freeze 55 to 56. He dies in 57. NASA's formed in 1958. Then after Operation Deep Freeze and whatever weirdness took place down there, everybody leaves Antarctica, and they go and form this Antarctic Treaty and put that into place in 1961. The original signatories were the 12 countries active in Antarctica during the International Geophysical Year 1957 to 58. The 12 countries that had significant interest in Antarctica at the time were Argentina, Australia, Belgium, Chile, France, Japan, New Zealand, Norway, South Africa, the Soviet Union, the United Kingdom, and of course the United States. These countries had established over 50 Antarctic stations for the International Geophysical Year. The treaty was a diplomatic expression of the operational and scientific cooperation that had been achieved on the ice. Something happened down there after Operation Deep Freeze, and presumably about the time that Admiral Byrd died. So all these nations that I just talked about here, they leave there, they come back, they sign this Antarctic Treaty. At the same time, NASA's formed, and right away, the United States and Russia start launching high-altitude nuclear bombs in the atmosphere. Now, I can see why the people will put on a conspiracy hat at this point, because if they're trying to avoid a conspiracy, they're not helping with the names. You've heard me say it before. I'm going to say it again. You got Operation High Jump, Operation Deep Freeze. NASA's formed, they signed this Antarctic Treaty, and then when you look at the high-altitude nuclear bomb tests that began here, I'm going to go ahead and read Operation Dominic here. Operation Dominic was a series of 31 nuclear test explosions with a 38.1 megaton total yield conducted in 1962 by the United States in the Pacific. This test series was scheduled quickly in order to respond in kind to the Soviet resumption of testing after the tacit 1958-61 test moratorium. Most of these shots were conducted with free-fall bombs dropped from B-52 bomber aircraft. 20 of these shots were to test new weapons designs, 6 to test weapons effects, and several shots to confirm the reliability of existing weapons. The Thor missile was also used to lift warheads into near space to conduct high-altitude nuclear explosion tests. These shots were collectively called Operation Fishbowl. Operation Dominic occurred during a period of high Cold War tension between the United States and the Soviet Union, since the Cuban Bay of Pigs invasion had occurred not long before. Nikita Khrushchev announced the end of a 3-year moratorium on nuclear testing on 30 August 1961, and Soviet tests recommenced on 1 September, initiating a series of tests that included the detonation of Tsar Bomba. President John F. Kennedy responded by authorizing Operation Dominic. It was the largest nuclear weapons testing program ever conducted by the United States and the last atmospheric test series conducted by the U.S., as the Limited Test Ban Treaty was signed in Moscow the following year. Now, check this out. If you click on Operation Fishbowl, we learn about Operation Fishbowl here was a series of high-altitude nuclear tests in 1962 that were carried out by the United States as part of the larger Operation Dominic nuclear test program. The Operation Fishbowl nuclear tests were originally planned to be completed during the first half of 1962, with 3 tests named Bluegill, Starfish, and Orca. The first test attempt was delayed until June. Planning for Operation Fishbowl, as well as many other nuclear tests in the region, was begun rapidly in response to the sudden Soviet announcement on 30 August 1961 that they were ending a 3-year moratorium on nuclear testing. The rapid planning of very complex operations necessitated many changes as the project progressed. All of the tests were to be launched on missiles from Johnston Island in the Pacific Ocean north of the equator. Johnston Island had already been established as a launch site for United States high-altitude nuclear tests rather than the other locations in the Pacific Proving Grounds. In 1958, Lewis Strauss, then chairman of the United States Atomic Energy Commission, opposed doing any high-altitude tests at locations that had been used for earlier Pacific nuclear tests. His op was because of fears that the flash from the nighttime high-altitude detonations might blind civilians who were living on nearby islands. Johnston Island was a remote location more distant from populated areas than other potential test locations. In order to protect residents of the Hawaiian Islands from flash blindness or permanent retinal injury from the bright nuclear flash, the nuclear missiles of Operation Fishbowl were launched generally toward the southwest of Johnston Island so that the detonations would be farther from Hawaii. Orca was to be a test of about 1 megaton yield at very high altitude, above 1,000 kilometers. The proposed Orca test was always controversial, especially after the damage caused to satellites by the Starfish Prime detonation, as described below. Orca was finally canceled, and an extensive reevaluation of the Operation Fishbowl plan was made during an 82-day operations pause after the Bluegill Prime disaster of 25 July 1962, as described below. And you could go on and read about Kingfish and all this stuff. Okay, so we got Operation Dominic, within which we have Operation Fishbowl. Now, with the tinfoil hat on, playing conspiracy theory here, the flat earthers are claiming, and I think it's a reasonable claim, that, you know, if that model is true, then we know we have a circle, the circle of the earth as described in the Bible, surrounded by Antarctica, the outer rim, that has a 200 or 300 foot ice wall, cliff, that keeps everything in, hence Operation High Jump. You got to get over that, right? So it looks like, at least from the flat earther perspective, that probably during Operation Deep Freeze, they may have found the edge of the dome, presumably anywhere from 800 to 1,200 miles inland from the coast. Then everybody pulls out, signs this treaty, says nobody can go back except under the express guidelines of the international community that signed the treaty. So then all of a sudden the United States and Russia engaged in these high altitude nuclear tests, and the United States calls theirs Operation Dominic, within which we have Operation Fishbowl. Now, hold that thought. This is all happening. If you go and look on the Operation Dominic entry, you see the different dates. We're 1962. This is the early part of 1962. We're talking May. I mean, look at all these bombs going off. 25 April 1962, 27 April, 2 May, 4 May, 6 May, 8 May, 9 May, 11 May, 11 May, 12 May, 14 May, 19, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This is all before President Kennedy's "let's go out in the space" speech. But I think a lot of people don't realize that our first stop wasn't the moon. Even before we went to the moon, they were sending probes all of a sudden after all of this. Okay, keep the timeline in mind. Operation High Jump, Operation Deep Freeze, Byrd dies, NASA's founded, Antarctic Treaty signed, Operation Dominic and Fishbowl take effect. And if you notice during President Kennedy's speech, he was talking about that they've already got probes headed to Venus. Wait a minute. We're already sending stuff to Venus and Mars? We haven't even been to the moon yet. And so I was looking into that, and on planetary.org/explore/space topics/space missions to Venus-Mercury.html. And you can go through this site. It starts sort of from the bottom up. As early as February 4th, 1961, they're sending a probe, Sputnik 7. Russia sent this probe to check out Venus. The final stage of the rocket carrying Sputnik 7 into orbit failed, and the spacecraft was unable to achieve the necessary trajectory to carry it onto Venus. Then Venera 1, Russia, sends out another probe February 12, 1961. They lost communications while it was on its way to Venus. Then NASA sends up Mariner 1, July 22nd, 1962. Now, that's right in the middle of Dominic and Fishbowl that we sent out a probe to go check out Venus. It veered off course and was destroyed by ground controllers. So then Russia sends up another one, Sputnik 19, August 25th, 1962. The spacecraft made it into orbit, but the rocket's last stage failed, as Sputnik 19 was unable to achieve its Venus trajectory and re-entered the Earth's atmosphere 3 days later. NASA, August 27th, 1962, sends its probe. It says Mariner 2 was the first spacecraft to successfully fly by Venus at an altitude of 34,773 kilometers. The spacecraft discovered ground temperatures, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so this is during the time period that between August 27th, 1962 and December 14th, 1962, that we had President Kennedy's speech in September, on September 12th, 1962. So that's what he's referring to. You know, we've already got stuff out there, and you can read about the other ones that were, checking out Venus, I guess Mercury also, and attempted probes going to Mars. Now, this is all before we've even been to the moon. So it appears that whatever happened in Antarctica, everybody got kind of maybe nervous or excited or whatever and said, okay, what is the deal? We've looked through telescopes. We've seen our so-called neighbors, Venus and Mars, through telescopes. Our assumption is the solar system is, set up in the Copernican model. And, but yet maybe they found a dome and they started to question all that. So the first thing they do is send out probes to go, wait a minute, what in the world? If we're in a dome, how high does this thing go? So they start launching high altitude nuclear bombs. And if you look at the videos on Operation Fishbowl and Starfish Prime and all those high altitude tests, I mean, it looks like they're hitting something up there. At least from a conspiratorial tinfoil hat wearing perspective, that's what it looks like. Now, this is what blew my mind. You can read more on all that if you'd like, to get caught up to speed on what's going on there. So I go to Lubbock, and I'm doing this conference out there at Jared Cressman's father's church, Pastor Dan Cressman, and we get to talking about this whole issue of the flat Earth stuff. And he goes, do you know what the name Dominic means? And I said, no. He says, you talk about Operation Fishbowl, but check this out. I'm going to take you to, I'll put the screen share back up here. Take you to one of those name websites. I like using behindthename.com. Look up the name Dominic, and again, let's just double check it here. Dominic, D-O-M-I-N-I-C. Look up Dominic, D-O-M-I-N-I-C, from the late Latin name Dominicus, meaning of the Lord. Fishbowl was part of Operation Dominic. It looks like they are sending high altitude nuclear bombs to test the Fishbowl of the Lord, i.e., the firmament. Yeah, this is definitely one of those things to make you go,
How about just a little more proof? Check out the gravestone on NASA's head rocket scientist and Nazi, Wernher von Braun. The Nazis, aka NASA, blasted God's firmament with nukes and couldn't break through.
Is to be the first civilian team in history to launch a rocket that reaches space.
Wernher von Braun's gravestone is admitting God wins. Full disclosure number 2. I wasn't a full believer in God until I learned about this 6 months ago. Now, there's zero doubt in my mind. Even Tesla believed in the firmament. I know the QAnon community appreciates the genius of Nikola Tesla, and that Trump's Uncle John got to examine Tesla's work. And then there's Julian Assange. Is Julian Assange Trump's cousin? Getting back on track. So what do Trump, the Space Force, Mars, Greenland, Flat Earth, and the Roman Empire have to do with each other? I promise they all connect. If you feel like Ace Ventura right now, I know your pain.
All right, here we go. Answer's right there, just gotta get some blood to the brain. Finkel and Einhorn, 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 Finkel and Einhorn.
Greenland, Trump, Space Force, Mars, Rome, Flat Earth. Learning the Flat Earth stuff definitely connected some dots, but I knew there had to be more. That's when I found this. Greenland Theory. Apocalypse Now. David Chase Taylor dives deep into how the Roman Empire never actually fell. Rather, it faked its death and moved to Greenland, and has covertly ran the world for centuries. Prepare to have your mind blown. David Chase Taylor claims that ancient Rome faked its death and moved to Greenland, where it has been controlling the entire world through Switzerland and the CIA. I'll leave it up to you how deep you want to dig. David provides ample evidence of Rome's domination and rule over the world is readily evident in the architecture, calendar, currency, flags, names, numerology, universities, and symbols which currently represent almost every single entity on Earth. All roads lead to Rome, Q and Q Plus are going to war, going to Mars, and with the descendants of the Roman Empire. It's going to be biblical, just took on a whole new meaning. What are two of the most peaceful places on Earth? Switzerland and Greenland. Nobody messes with them. Nobody talks about them. Coincidence? I think not. And they both have massive mountain ranges. Great for hiding. Isaiah 2:21. They will go into the caves of the rocks and the crevices in the cliffs, away from the terror of the Lord, and from his majestic splendor when he rises to terrify the earth. This, my friends, is why POTUS pointed us towards Greenland. Greenland is a fascinating place and the perfect cover. It's one of the least talked about countries in the world. It's just a barren wasteland covered in ice, right? Well, no, it's not at all. Let's take a closer look, shall we? According to Google, Greenland is the widest country in the world. It's completely covered by an ice sheet. Here's the middle of Greenland in 3D mode, completely with zero detail, right? You can take tours of Greenland's ice sheet. I noticed an interesting testimonial towards the bottom of the page. I've been on many glaciers, like in the Himalayas, but Greenland is another world, vast, and a totally different view. Strange patterns in the ice sheet. Check out this National Geographic article. Mapping the hidden worlds beneath Greenland's ice. The NASA study reveals an extensive network of ancient rivers. Ancient Rome. Look at all the perfect right angles in the river system. NASA's Operation Icebridge mapped Greenland's ice in 3D. Have a look.
For decades, scientists have been probing the Greenland ice sheet from the ground, air, and space. Now a new study uses those observations to see within the ice sheet, laying bare a tale more than 100,000 years in the making. When we look inside an ice sheet, we can see distinct layers formed by thousands of years of snowfall. As snow accumulates, these layers get progressively compacted into ice, which then flows under its own weight. To get a precise history of a particular spot on an ice sheet, scientists drill into it and recover ice cores, which provide a record of the ice's age and what the past climate was like. Seasonal variations, along with ash from volcanic eruptions, show up in the cores, allowing us to date the ice and correlate samples from different sites. To extend this age information across the ice sheet, the best tool that we have is ice-penetrating radar, mounted on aircraft flying low over the surface. Radar transmits electromagnetic pulses into the ice and records the reflected signals, allowing us to track the depth of the layers detected in the ice. Since 2009, NASA's Operation Icebridge has flown over Greenland more than 100 times with a wide variety of instruments, including radar, and produced vast quantities of data, adding to the work from many other missions. This has allowed researchers to generate a three-dimensional map depicting the age of the ice throughout the Greenland ice sheet. This 3D age map shows that three distinct periods of climate are evident within the ice sheet. The Holocene, shown here in green, the last ice age, shown in blue, and the Eemian, shown here in red. The top layers from the Holocene period formed during the last 11.7 thousand years and are fairly flat and uniform, though the thickness varies depending on how much snowfall occurred. Below this, deeper within the ice sheet, we see layers that formed during the last ice age. Layers from this period are darker and more complex, having been further squeezed and sometimes folded as they flowed over the rugged bedrock below. Deeper still are layers of ice left over from the warm period before the last ice age, more than 115,000 years ago. Eemian ice can reveal how the ice sheet responded to a period of warmth similar to the one we are experiencing today. Several ice cores have recovered Eemian ice, but it is difficult to interpret. This new map of the age of the ice sheet shows that there is more Eemian ice than expected in northern Greenland, where it may be easier for scientists to collect and analyze. This new analysis reveals a 3D map of the age of the Greenland ice sheet, from the oldest Eemian ice to the layers deposited during the last ice age to the ice that formed during the Holocene. The response of the ice sheet to past climate change led to its current age structure. Further study will help us better understand how the Greenland ice sheet will respond to today's changing climate.
NASA data reveals a mega canyon under Greenland's ice sheet, and it's bigger than the Grand Canyon. Hiawatha Crater. Here's a fantastic propaganda piece by Science Mag.
66 million years ago, an asteroid longer than Mount Everest is tall hurtled toward the Earth, crashing into the Gulf of Mexico.
In the first 2 seconds, you get 66 million years, 8.8 on its side, infinity signs, and an asteroid as big as Mount Everest. So if they had been flying over Greenland as much as they say, why do we get pixelated images like this near the North Pole? And why does Google show you this when you type North Pole? I thought the North Pole looked like this. They are hiding it from us, folks. This is where Flat Earth really becomes important. All ancient cultures depict the North Pole as a powerful magical place of God.
And from there, I went to the middle of the earth and saw a blessed, well-watered place, which had branches which remained alive and sprouted from a tree which had been cut down. And there I saw a holy mountain, and under the mountain, to the east of it, there was water, and it flowed towards the south. And a river went out of Eden to water the garden, and from there it was parted and became 4 heads. Beautiful in elevation is the joy of all the earth, Mount Zion, in the far north, the city of the great king.
What's exciting about this?
Well, they're all facing north, right?
Yeah, so?
The needle's naturally drawn to the Earth's magnetic North Pole.
Meaning, if we follow the compasses north?
They should lead us to the gate.
The North Pole is that big black dot on the Gleason's map from 1892. What you learn about the Saturn, Satan worship of ancient Rome and the Satanism behind the globe Earth theory, you will understand why they would move to the closest country to the North Pole to hide it from us. Have a look.
Now let's take a look at the Antarctic and Arctic circles. Oh, would you look at that? 66.6 degrees north and 66.6 degrees south. Must just be a coincidence, huh?
The current commander of the International Space Station about to break a big record tonight.
Here's ABC's Gio Benitez.
They call it the Peggy factor, Mission Control's code word for the way superstar astronaut Peggy Whitson always gets the job done.
I love it up here.
Tonight, Commander Whitson making history with her record for any American. By the time she lands in September, her tally will be 666 days in space. Will be 666 days in space. Will be 666 days in space, with more spacewalks, currently 8, than any other female astronaut.
Now let's go over the diameter of the moon. This is a new one. I actually didn't know. It's 2,160 miles, but you take 6 times 6 times 6, there you go, 2160. The surface temperature of Uranus, oh, there you go, negative 216, which is 6 times 6 times 6, 216. Oh, you thought we were done. Let's do Pluto's orbital velocity. Scroll down here. Oh, there we go. 666. The speed of sound in knots. Speed of sound. Oh, well, you look at that. 666 knots. The Earth's circumference in nautical miles. Oh, 21,600. There you go, ladies and gentlemen. Again, 600 times 6 times 6. Another coincidence, 21,600. How far is Mars from the sun? Oh, well, 1.666 astronomical units. Now let's look at Ceres' synodic period. And just as you expected, 666. Again, the devil's in the details, ladies and gentlemen. Saturn's orbital distance in kilometers. Let's take a look at the numbers. Oh, 1,426,666,000. The Bible clearly states in Psalm 2, the kings of the earth have taken up arms against the Lord and his anointed, saying, let us break their chains and cast them asunder. And God, who sits in heaven, laughs and says he will hold them in derision.